It has been a barn burner of a week here at Aging Gracefully, and we started the whole thing off on Monday with an incomparable collection of talent both in front of the camera and behind the camera with 1983's Twilight Zone the movie. Wednesday rolled around and we had to give you something from Wes Craven because he's got an underappreciated gem known as The People Under the Stairs that we just needed to take a look at. And today on a glorious Friday afternoon, just before we're going to roll into the weekend, we are going to sit with Stephen King and the gem known throughout horror as 1989's Pet Sematary. Let's dig into that one. Now this story, like most others, is about love, and it's also about death. Now, when something or someone that you love dies, can you let it go and just appreciate the moments that you had together? Or is it a notion that's just so unbearable that you would go to drastic, psychotic, crazy lengths for just a little bit more time? That's the question that gets answered here. And the movie opens up in a patch of woods that looks like a junk dump. I mean, I grew up in North Carolina. You see these all over the place. Tall grass, people take their trash out there and leave it rather than dealing with it. And it looks like what we've happened upon here until we see the grave markers and the makeshift tombstones with collars hanging on them. We even see little notes from the owners to the pets that they've lost, which makes it sad, but it also makes it that much creepier. Now, there's a country winding road that we go to next with a 18-wheeler just flying down that sucker. I have no idea who would live on that road and not address that situation, but seeing it the way we see it here, it just tells you that this is going to play a really big role in this movie later on. Gorgeous house out in Maine with a sold sign in the yard, and then we see the Creed family, all apologies to Apollo, pulling into the driveway, eager to start a new chapter in their life. Immediately, the little girl Ellie bounces out of the car and notices his pathway leading from their new house out into the woods. Lewis Creed is the town's new doctor. He's joined there by Rachel, their daughter Ellie, who we just spoke about, their son Gage, who's absolutely adorable, played by Miko Hughes from Wes Craven's New Nightmare, another movie that we love dearly here at Aging Gracefully, and their family cat Church. Now, not long after they pull into their new home, their across the road neighbor, Mr. Judd Crandall, comes over to introduce himself, and he is played by Fred Gwynne of Herman Munster fame. Ellie asks immediately about the path, and Judd decides to tell her, I promise I'll show you what it is, and I'll even tell you the story that goes right along with it. Now, I don't really know how house shopping worked back in the 80s because I wasn't buying houses in the 80s, but you'd like to think these people would come and see the bones of this place before they put pen to paper. And if they did buy it sight unseen, that just makes them dumb. And if they didn't, and they overlooked the fact that there is a creepy winding path from their house out into the dark woods, you would tend to ask a question or two at that point. I mean, Ellie saw it right away. Are you telling me a bunch of grown adults didn't see the same thing on the property they were about to buy? Come on. Logic gaps, people. Major logic gaps. They all end up moseying on down there, and it's every bit as creepy as the misspelled name suggests. Judd tells the story, and Rachel almost admonishes him for so openly talking about death around her kids. And I get it, because I'm a parent. But I hate this lady. I mean, I just don't like her. She reminds me of that evil woman from Lionheart, the stellar Jean-Claude Van Damme vehicle. In fact, both of these parents are on my hate list due to movies that they've done in the past. Moving on, though. After the trip to the Pet Sematary, Ellie is very distraught and upset about the idea of losing Church because she never really considered the concept before going down there and seeing all those graves for all those pets. And it makes sense when you consider the fact that all the animals that were down there were due to that road and those trucks coming down that road, that high rate of speed. How do they not address this with the trucking company at some point? I mean, again, why wouldn't you ask a question? Now, the doc, as far as he goes, he encounters a kid who got hit by, you guessed it, a truck. The kid ends up dying, but then he appears periodically to Lewis, warning him about the barrier between the Pet Sematary and the other side. So Ellie, Gage, and Lionheart Lady decide to go to Chicago for a few days, and lucky Lewis because shortly thereafter, Judd calls Lewis and says, hey, your cat's over here on my property motionless by the side of the road because he played chicken with the wrong truck. In this movie, this is the moment that business starts to pick up. For some reason, Judd, knowing the story of the Indian burial ground just beyond the Pet Sematary, because Judd himself as a boy had a dog buried in that Indian burial ground, the dog came back. But it wasn't the same dog, it was just a little meaner, and eventually they had to put it down. So he knows this. He knows what happens when you put something in that ground. And still, he takes Lewis and the newly dead church out there to bury this cat. Why, in the name of Herman Munster's shapely, beautiful wife, would you want that to happen? Now, ultimately he explains he doesn't want Ellie to suffer the heartbreak of losing a pet, but at what cost? The very next morning, Church is back, stinking, hissing his furry little ass off at Lewis. And with Lewis being a man of science, he's a doctor after all, he starts to rationalize this, but can't. He figures, well, maybe Church wasn't really dead when we put him in that bag and put all that dirt over him. He even asked Judd, after he's accepted what happened, if anyone has ever tried to bury a person out there. To which Judd has a pretty bad reaction to before he finally comes clean and tells the story of a guy who did go in as a dead person and came back out violent and somewhat evil. Again, Judd knows what that burial site will do to people, to animals. He knows what's going to happen. Nothing good was going to come of that, but we go ahead and do our thing. I guess we don't have a movie if he doesn't, so there you go. Once the family returns from Chicago, though, Ellie's happy to be back with her cat. She's thrilled to see Church. She's not happy about the way he smells, though, and I thought that was a really important detail in this movie. That decaying smell of death being included when these things get brought back, really good writing. We wind up getting a little bit of backstory on the mom and her aversion to talking about death. Forget death. I mean, death is horrible anyway. She doesn't even like talking about death. But it's because of some issues she had when she was little with her older sister who fell really, really ill before ultimately dying. So it's some sad stuff, and it plays into a couple creepy scenes later in the movie, but I could have done without it, to be honest with you. And a little bit later, the family and Judd are picnicking when we see a semi ominously fueling up back at the depot. And the way they did this, the dramatic style they shot it, you instantly knew something bad was on the horizon. And as a person new to the story, never having read the book, I confess, I think I know where they're about to go, but I'm hoping like hell that they don't do it. And they do it. Beautiful scene. A father playing with Gage and a kite. Then the goof looks back to his wife, smiling like a doofus. I mean, yes, smile at your wife. Smile at your beautiful little girl. Even if you want to smile at Judd, whatever. Do it for a split second and pay attention to the little boy that you are playing with, not far from the road at all. That dangerous, dangerous road. We hear the brakes screech. We hear the mother yelling. And then we see a shocked look on Gage before a bloody shoe starts spinning around in the road, having been knocked off of a little boy. Ah! Really well shot scene of Lewis screaming into the sky before we see literal snapshots of the family with Gage throughout the years from the time he was a baby up until present day. Heartbreaker. Absolute heartbreaker. And as a dad, my absolute 100% unequivocal worst fear ever. Absolutely tragic. Sometimes dead is better. Now this is a phrase that gets brought up a couple of different times.
Sometimes dead is better.
And it's a tagline on that terrible remake that they did. But sometimes dead is better. And Judd says that as he's consoling Lewis, because he knows what Lewis is thinking, because he asked if anybody had ever buried anybody, a human being that is, in the burial ground beyond the Pet Sematary. He just knows what's going on. And Judd even feels a little bit of responsibility here because he feels like he introduced that burial ground, whatever it is, to this family. And the burial ground wanted just a little bit more from that family. And of course, Lewis wants to bury Gage there. I know it's a stupid idea, but I get sad all over again when he's sitting there at the edge of the grave after he's dug up his son and he's holding his son's body in his hand. running his fingers through his hair, patting him on the back. Pumpkinhead all over again. It kills me. Third act of this movie, it's almost flawless. It's done really well. Miko Hughes, when he comes back from being buried at the Indian burial ground, he's not screwing around. They jump right into the horror, and he wanders back into his house, tracking mud everywhere because that's what kids do. Gets in his dad's bag, takes the scalpel out, and then he moseys over to see Judd. And Judd's a great character in this movie, and I hated seeing Judd go. But Judd goes, and it's very bloody, and it's very gruesome, and it's very memorable. On top of that, Rachel winds up coming back because she is buying into Ellie's bad feelings about Dad being in danger and something going on. Rachel gets on a plane, she rents a car, she hops in a truck with a guy, all to come back, go over to Judd's house and see her little boy there. Her dead little boy with his arms out wanting his mom. Now, as a parent, if I saw that, I'd pick that kid up too. But she has no idea, or she just overlooks the fact that in his hand is a scalpel. And Rachel, we don't really see too much more of her past that. But then Lewis, who slept through the whole thing up until this point, gets a phone call, and it's Gage on the phone calling from Judd's house, asking his father to come and play with him. Now again, this breaks my heart. Absolutely kills me. Specifically what this whole thing has done to the dad, because I don't like the character, I don't really like the actor, but I can't imagine having to go through all of that as a father. And it leaves him nuts. Absolutely nuts what he has to do to his little boy, because he's got some sort of compound in a syringe that he uses to first kill that damn cat, and then he goes in and he has to use it on his little boy. And when he does, spoiler alert, the little boy holds his neck where the needle mark was and starts to cry and walks away and goes, "Not fair, not fair." And it's just like, God, I know the kid's evil, but man, if that were my kid. But it winds up actually driving Lewis crazy, because when he finds his dead wife over there, guess what he wants to do with her? He wants to go bury her in the Indian burial ground. Yeah, this was a really, really good horror movie, and I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Obviously, it ages gracefully. I think this is the first time I've seen it since the first time that I've seen it, because slashers were my thing as a kid growing up. That's what I gravitated towards. And I didn't really like reading, so Stephen King wasn't my thing. And I'm pretty sure my folks made me watch this movie, otherwise I wouldn't have seen it when I was a kid. But very, very solid movie here. The only reason it's only a 7 out of 10 is because of some serious, serious logic gaps, such as Judd, knowing what that burial site was, taking Lewis and the cat up there in the first place. I mean, think about this. They never would have known what that area is or was, for the most part. They certainly never would have buried anything up there. I mean, if you look at that place, are you going to step foot on that, much less put some sort of carcass in there? No chance. No chance. And the whole dynamic for the Creed family changes. They're probably all still alive, happily ever after. The cat's gone, but they probably bought a new one since then. Scary stuff, great story. I love new horror ideas, or at least something that tries to be different. And they did that really well here. You feel bad for Ellie, because she has nothing to come home to. But this caps off a pretty solid week for us here. Unfortunately, a lot of bodies had to fall over the course of that time in these films to get us to where we are. This is Aging Gracefully. I'm Matthew Essex. I would really appreciate it if you guys thought about subscribing. There's a button you can hit, and there's a like button, and then there's another button, and there's a bell, and I don't know, just hang out with me every once in a while. It makes me feel important. But until then, we'll see you on the other side.